winter night in Groton, Massachusetts, just a few months before the death of her father, Timothy, or after the death of her father, Timothy, Margaret Fuller walked past bare trees to sit at the bedside of a dying girl. The girl had tuberculosis, but it was not that disease that was soon to end her life. Rather, the girl, pregnant and unmarried, had sustained fatal injuries in a botched abortion. 5 years later, in a letter to her friend Caroline Sturgis, Fuller used ornately delicate language to recall that night. She wrote, quote, "It was said she had profaned her maiden state, and that the means she took to evade the consequences of her stain had destroyed her health and placed her on this bed of death." Unquote. But Fuller's stately tone could not conceal the horror that she had felt upon witnessing the scene. Recalling her patient as wretched, Fuller described the sick chamber as, quote, "full of poverty, base thoughts, and fragments of destiny," unquote. And the rest of her recollection merits quotation in full. "As I raised her dying head, it rested against my bosom like a clod that should never have been taken from the valley. On my soul brooded a sadness of deepest calm. I looked, I gazed into that abyss, lowest in humanity, of crime for the sake of sensual pleasure. My eye was steadfast, yet above me shone a star, pale, tearful. Still it shone. It was mirrored from the very blackness of the yawning gulf. Through the shadows of that night, ghost-like, with step unlistened for, unheard assurance came to me. Oh, it has ever been thus. From the darkest comes my brightness. From chaos depths, my love. I return with the morning star." Now, Fuller's letter to Sturgis is a useful corrective, first off, for anyone prone to the lazy but seductive habit of supposing that the heroes of American transcendentalism were simply a crowd of 21st century liberals who fell into a time warp. It's hard for me to imagine a figure more pitiable than the wretched girl in Fuller's recollection, racked by pain, smitten by shame, and breathing out her final breaths in a desolate room and in an almost friendless condition. Yet Margaret's judgment was strikingly firm. In choosing to abort her fetus, the girl had, in Fuller's words, committed a crime in the name of sexual license that had plunged her into, quote, "that abyss lowest in humanity," unquote. After such a pronouncement, any claim to modern political correctness on behalf of Margaret Fuller must certainly lie in tatters. But that fact, I submit, is beside the point. I said just now that the girl in Groton died in an almost friendless condition. Almost friendless, but not quite. And not quite for the simple reason that Margaret Fuller was there. She had no sympathy at all for the girl's conduct. It even occurred to her that the girl ought never to have been born. And yet what deserves to be remembered and repeated about this story is the fact that she was there. Her principles did not override the dictates of simple kindness. Fuller's ability to hold both condemnation and compassion in her mind and heart at the same moment was indeed remarkable. What's still more striking is her statement to Sturgis about how essential to her being was a sense of moral chiaroscuro, the intimation that if she could not walk in darkness, she would never be able to rise into the light. It was only the experience of the depths that could unleash in Fuller her complete capacity for love. This quality of Fuller's spirit relates powerfully to her thinking about the state of women in society. Fuller's ideal notion of herself and of women in general could not be separated from her credo of aspiration and advancement. Her understanding of a life well lived was one of upward striving, in which the person sought ceaselessly to evolve and to better know herself. Such a life, she believed, was in keeping with the progressive nature of the universe. However, Fuller could not ignore the contradictions between her ideal theory of humankind and the evidence she saw all around her. True, she was adept at surrounding herself with aspiring souls. Nevertheless, she realized that, as a metaphysician, she needed somehow to account for those souls who showed little or no inclination to ascend.